Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to this debate called Politics and Scientific Research. So two words intrinsically related. So I'm Clotilde Renard, I'm PhD at CSCL, and I will be the chairwoman of this debate. So we are really glad to discuss the question today with specialists from different horizons. So we will have with us Florence Agostino-Etchetto, Jérôme Honnorat, and Bruno Lina. And unfortunately, Karine Langou cannot be with us. So you are following the broadcast of this debate, and we will be glad to take your question on the Q&A part. So just write your question on it, but if you have any technical issue, you can send them to me on the private chat or send us, tell us. So feel free to ask any question you want, and we will transmit them to the guests and to make this debate more lively. So we greatly thank all of you, all the speakers, to be with us today and participate in this debate, which will be for sure interesting and challenging. And so the debate will be moderated by Mathieu Rouault, which is a scientific journalist at GrandLabo, and that we also sincerely thank for his work for this debate. So thank you, everyone, and the place is yours, Mathieu.
And thank you a lot, Clotilde. Now comes the time of our third and last roundtable meeting of this online Congress. Just like Clotilde said, for newcomers, I am Mathieu Rouault, and I am your host. Today, I'm a science journalist at GrandLabo, a YouTube channel for young scientists just like you, on which we talk about science careers, place of women and minorities in science, ethics of research, etc., etc. In this very roundtable, we will talk about the relations between science and policy. Do policymakers have a clear understanding on the way science works? Do scientists know the process, the language, the habits of policymakers? What did the pandemic reveal about the dialogue between these two worlds? What can we collectively learn from these last months as far as the role of science in our society is concerned? What has this pandemic crisis brought to light in the way science is funded and managed? Let's talk about this with our three guests. Florence Agostino-Etchetto. Hello. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for hosting me today.
It's very nice of you to accept to be with us today. You are a general director of Lyonbiopôle, which supports projects and innovative companies in the healthcare and life science sector in Aura region. You worked before at the Hospice Civil of Lyon as assistant manager, and you graduated of the École des Hautes Études en Santé Publique.
That's right.
Professor Jérôme Honnorat, do you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that you join us here for this last roundtable. You are head of the French Reference Center on Paraneoplastic Neurological Syndromes and Autoimmune Encephalitis at Hôpital Neurological in Brown, and you're also group leader at INMG about synaptopathies and autoantibodies. You're also vice president in charge of University Hôpital interfaces at the University Claude Bernard Lyon 1. And last but not least, Professor Bruno Lina. How are you?
I'm fine.
Thanks a lot for joining us. You're a professor of virology in the Université de Lyon, head of the virology lab of the Hospices Civil de Lyon, director of the National Influenza Center, director of the French National Reference Center for Enterovirus, and the head of the ViroPath team in the Syrie Research Center. You're a scientific expert for the French Ministry of Health, and you've been temporary expert for World Health Organization. A huge thanks once again to three of you for participating to this debate. And of course, once again, feel free, dear PhD students, to share your comments, to ask your question in the live chat, just as Clotilde told you before. A quick presentation. Of course, I have presented you very quickly just now, but I would like with you to come back on more specific points of your activities today. Jérôme Honnorat, what's your main field of research today? On what are you working on?
I'm working on rare diseases to identify biomarkers and to be able to diagnose the patients with blood or study of CSF to identify autoantibodies that are specific of one particular disease, and to be able to identify the disease and to determine the best treatment for the patients. So we are working on very rare disease, but to identify the patients, it's necessary to see a lot of different patients. So as the head of the reference center in France, we are in contact with all the other hospitals in France and with both activity in clinical research and basic research to understand the mechanisms of the disease.
In your staff, how many members, just to have an
I
idea?
don't know.
You don't know? A lot of people.
Something like, around 50.
Yes.
Around 50.
Bruno Lina, what is, I mentioned it before, but what is VIRPATH team?
But the VIRPATH team actually is a team that is part of the Centre International de Recherche en Infectiologie, which is the building where you have all the infectious disease departments where the research is done. So it collects clinicians, it collects scientists, it collects biologists. They're all working together in the different fields of the infectious disease, which means clinical, bacteriological, virological, parasitic, and also immune response. So we all together try to make a kind of big building where everything you need to know about viruses, about bacteria has to be, discussed and looked after. So it's there. Please. Sorry.
Sorry. Go on.
Yeah. So the VIRPATH team there is one of the 24 teams that is in this building. And we are focusing on the respiratory diseases, mostly the viral disease, with a very hot topic, which is the SARS-CoV-2, the COVID-19. But there's a long-standing work that is done on influenza viruses. And we try to understand the different mechanisms by which these viruses can infect cells and how we can protect ourselves against these diseases. And the added value we have in this group is that we are closely connected to the clinicians, and we have a lot of specimens. And this is due to the fact that we are hospital-based, first of all. And the second thing is that we have the National Reference Center for respiratory viruses, which helps for the, if you want to detect a new virus, that's the best way to do it, because anytime there's something peculiar that emerges, it is sent to our lab. So we try to develop as much as possible tools. And we have almost every tool you can expect to do this investigation on the role of the viruses in diseases. We have in vitro and we have ex vivo and in vivo tools. And this is interesting because we can use the most modern technology to try to understand how these viruses behave in bodies and why do they make us sick.
It's a multidisciplinary work. Is it easy to make these fields of research to communicate? Each scientist has its own path, even if the main field is virology. Sometimes is it difficult to make them speak together? Talk together.
Well, I understand your point. The larger the group it is, the most difficult it is, because it's human behavior. Sometimes everybody wants to be the most important people in the group. So, and they think that their specific topic is the most important. But still, there's cross-fertilization when you have people that are in different fields where you have added value from different knowledge that is within the clinicians, within the biologists, within the researchers. And that's where you could really get added value from everybody. And so my role in this is try to connect, to have everybody connected with everybody. I'm not bench work, I'm not doing bench work. I'm just doing human resource work and try to think about the research and try to understand how to do it the best way.
Florence Agostino-Etchetto, I said it just before, you're CEO of Lyonbiopôle. So what is Lyonbiopôle and what is your role as CEO?
Lyonbiopôle is a biocluster located here in Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region. That means that our main objective is really to build a community of researchers, clinicians, industrial people coming from small and big companies, and to give them the opportunity to work all together. And for that, we provide a lot of conferences, roundtables, face-to-face meeting for having a lot of innovative projects in this region. And as a CEO, my job is to have a long-term view of what we have to do and to provide for my team a road.
Do industrials and scientists communicate easily on this matter, on this subject?
Well, in France, the problem of the public-private partnership is one of the most important problems because it's not a tradition, even if now it's a real part of the work of everyone. And I think that Lyonbiopôle, for example, is existing for 15 years. And for 15 years, we developed more than 300 collaborative projects between companies and academics people. And,
how many did you say? How many?
300.
Is it a lot or not?
Yes, it's a lot. It's a lot. We're speaking about more than 1 billion euros funding. So it's a lot. And this area is one of the most productive region of France about research and collaborative research. And people working together develop a knowledge of what they are all accepting and what they are all waiting for. And that's very important to understand that even if you're not in the same world, you have a common view, and that's the first point to build something together. So yes, it's possible. Yes, they are not still speaking the same language, but at the end of the day, I think that the goal of a lot of people in that field is really the patient and to provide something new, something better, to give better opportunities about the disease and about developing a common knowledge.
Do you, Jérôme Honnorat, do you have this same eventual problem as far as the discussion, the dialogue between hospital and university is concerned? Do these two blocks, I mean, do the worlds communicate easily together?
It depends.
It depends on what?
It depends of time and men's and women's. Now we are working very closely together to have the same objectives, to invest in the same topic, and to try to choose some part of the best chance to have an international level, because it's not possible to be the best in all the health problem and to develop all the topic. But in Lyon, we have some topics that are very high, very competitive, and it's very important to try to do the best from the university and the hospital to be in harmony and to be able to develop as possible the level of the science.
What's your point of view about the quality of the dialogue between the researchers and policymakers. It's a general appreciation that I
In general, I think that it's very difficult because on a cultural point of view, it depends what the main objective of the society, and I'm not sure that science is the heart of the problematics, the topics of the society.
But science is everywhere in society, though.
Yeah, but for the people, the science must be the result that we use. They can use phone, for example, and they think that it's normal. All the development that has been did to develop a phone seems to be a normal way. They don't think what is necessary to develop it and to be able to use it in the general population.
Do you agree?
An example.
Yes.
If you look at the diseases, the health problems, everybody thinks that if there is something, he can come to the hospital and to be cured. And it seems to be normal, and that it's not necessary to develop research because everything must be cured.
We have forget the pain that we have to.
Yeah. It was different in the 19th century, for example. Everybody thought that in the future we will have some development and some improvement of the quality of life because of science. And I think that now we forget it, and the general population think that it's finished. We did everything, and it's not necessary to search something.
But Bruno Lina, do they understand each other, scientists, researchers, and politicians, policymakers?
Well, actually, we can talk to each other, but the way we talk, we don't speak the same way. And actually, what I think is that there's, in the world of the policymakers, there's a very limited number of people that has real scientific knowledge and that have some scientific training, and that is a big problem because actually. When you have been trained as a scientist, then you understand how the scientists think and how they work. But if you're more, working on literature, when you're working and coming back from the ENA, these places where you can be trained for a lot of very interesting things, but not in science, then it becomes very difficult to try to really communicate with the people in the policymakers. And I can tell you that in the ministries, it's sometimes very difficult to have a real scientific discussion with somebody because they think like non-scientists. That it doesn't mean that they think wrong, but I think that when you want to build something based on non-existing knowledge, and you have to test things, you have to let them understand that science is not premonition and science is not intuition. It's something which is completely different. And most of the policymakers are based, and some of the best ones have very good intuitions, but it's not science. So the discussion we had with them is that you have to twist their mind so that they would be able to understand that based on what is an hypothesis, we need to build something so that we have a real understanding of what is going there and that we can demonstrate what is expected. And one of the very big things, maybe we could talk about this later on, is that the timelines of the way we think is not exactly the same. And so there's huge difference. Yes. And when you're talking with journalists, people like you, or when you're talking to politicians, the only thing that matters is when. And most of the time, we don't know. I mean, we don't know.
Right.
If we knew, then it's because it's finished and it's over. Otherwise, we never know.
Did you notice any progress in the last decade? And this question is for every three of you all.
Well, what I can tell you, if I may start, it's that I don't think there has been any real progress on the ground. I mean, they understand better some of the specific topics that have been discussed. Okay, but still, there's a lot of gap there between the scientists and the policymakers that remains. You know, and again, when I can take a very simple example. You know, global heating, global warming. Global warming is a scientific fact. How could you ask people whether it's wrong or it's true? I mean, it's a scientific fact. So you cannot be against. I mean, you cannot be against the Pythagorean theory. It's real life. So when you try to address specific questions, scientific questions, tricky and complicated questions to the policymakers, sometimes, and it's right, they have to challenge you. You have to be able to demonstrate that. But sometimes it's not what they want to hear. So then they think that it's an opinion and it's not a fact. And that's the big difference.
Do you think, and maybe this question I can ask to Florence Agostino-Etchetto, do you think that on the other side, scientists do understand what's the agenda of a politician? What is its or her work, or not that much?
Well, I think that Bruno highlighted this point just before, and the timeline is really different. And for sure, when you work with a scientist and politician on the same time, you immediately see that politicians are really linked by election in a short time, by the weight of the general population, by the fact that some new technology provide kind of solutions that let people think that everything can be like that. And they are very linked by all these factors. So when in front of them, they have a scientist speaking about a long-term view, the necessity of developing something in a real long time for having the right knowledge, a real knowledge, for them, it's really difficult to include that in their view, which is at the max 5 years. So when you're talking in health, especially when you're talking about projects, programs, which needs more than 5, maybe 10 years for having maybe not the good answer, but the beginning of
you have an anecdote, you have an experience yourself on
I have
this
a lot,
subject.
but
give us an example, please.
For example, when you speak with some politicians about the fact that we have to think differently the way of financing the research and giving the researchers a long view and not changing every year or every 2 years the main topics that they want to finance, it's very difficult for them because they go on the market, and on the market, some people will say to them, hey, my husband or my brother has a huge cancer, and I don't understand what there's no solution when, as mentioned before by Jérôme, you can provide a new iPhone every year, why there's nothing else. And when you meet the politician, when you go with the 5 presenting projects, presenting really interesting collaboration, they tell you, yes, but when do we have a result? Where is the result? Is it now?
Jérôme Honnorat, you agree?
Yes, I agree. In 10 years in research, you can have a very small results, and sometimes if you are lucky, you are able to have something very important that can change our mind. But most of the times, the scale of research is 20 years. And for politicians, 2 years is a very long time. So
Yes.
it's very difficult to discuss and to say, okay, you will invest your money, but you will invest for the other people, not for you. And most of the politicians are not agree with that. Okay, I want to invest, but for me, I want to be re-elected in 5 years or to win something in 2 years, but 20 years is too long.
And you didn't answer on my question about the fact that scientists themselves maybe do not understand the universe, or the politician universe. Maybe they do have to understand also and to work with them in order to have a better understanding of how deputy works. What is it?
Actually, it's true. I didn't answer this question. So I think that scientists has to consider that they are a part of the policy. For me, we have to find a way of maybe creating a new type of place for discussing really these questions. Because you can't consider that there is science for a part and there is policy for another part. The science must be a part of the policy. So for that, you're right, the scientist has to consider the problems, the situation of the politicians. But maybe sometimes it's really hard to merge all
but we will debate about the way to bridge the gap between science and society in the last part of our debate. But before that, I would like to know if, according to you, if France is a particular case regarding science policy relationships.
That's not.
As far as
I'm not sure.
I'm not so sure.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
It's the same in other countries?
No, it's not the same, but there is an adaptation between your politician and your scientist. It's not the same scientist in France than in US, and it's not the same politician too. And so I think that you must be in harmony with your universe. It's sure that science in France is different than science in Germany. It's not exactly the same. It's not exactly the same relationship with companies. It's not the same relationship with institutes, with politicians. And so it's particular, but it's just different.
A question from Elodie in the chat. Do you think that there is a strong pressure from the population on scientists, doctors, politicians, and that this pressure can lead to quick and wrong decisions due to the lack of perspective? If yes, how to deal with it? It's a huge question, but it's a good one. So how can we address it? Who wants to answer?
Yeah, I can say about, not directly to the question, but in part. It's part of the answer about the scientists who are in good relationship with politicians. You can have the example, it's a old example, but Pasteur, for example, understands very well how to make a deal with politicians to construct at the end of his life, Pasteur Institute, and is still very important in the world. You have some example in Strasbourg for the construction of a building on molecular biology, or for example, the creation of something that is called PHRC, is a call for clinical research in France, created 20 years ago, but that was very, very important to develop clinical research in France, and to have the ability each year to propose some project and to be funded to do the project. And so sometimes you may have a good deal to have something that could help to the development of science.
Let's talk about the pandemic crisis, because we can maybe understand a lot of things about the relationships between science and society through this episode. So first question, Bruno Lina, how is it to be member of the scientific committee created by President Macron?
Well, I'm not sure it's really the time to have a debrief of what was the scientific council, because it's still running.
Yes.
But you know, it's interesting to see from the inside how decisions can be taken. I can't tell you everything, because again, it's things are, you know, not to be known just because it's like that, you know. But it's interesting to be in very close relationship with the highest level of decision making, because you see how they work. And then you tend to understand what is their expectation. And actually, when you're really close to that kind of level of decision, one of the very important things is to not try to fall into have decisions taking to please the policymakers. And that's, you know, it's not that easy when you're in front of a bunch of very important people and tell them that what they are deciding is absolutely completely wrong. And because you're just a scientist and they have been elected for what they are doing. So it's very difficult. But these guys are really bright. They understand very well. And we could see how much they could learn from us. I don't know whether it was only from us, but also maybe from others as well. And I think that it is an interesting thing for both parties, because I tend to be less and less impressed by the politics. And but I understand a little bit better how do they work, and what is their way of thinking. And
it's a good experience.
Well, it is a very interesting experience for sure. It's a once in a life experience, so it's very interesting. But again,
yes.
Again, you know, I would certainly not would be willing to be in their position. I'm very comfortable as a scientist advising, which is, you know, that's quite simple. Even though you can be blamed for things you've been saying, you have not been deciding anything. So, and that's the purpose of what was the scientific committee. What is actually the scientific committee is try to provide as much possible clear information and robust information, so that the decisions that has to be done by the policymakers can be done in a way where they are less likely to be wrong. So that's how it works.
Would you say that the scientific committee is a good example of the way politicians should ask for the help of scientists in crisis time?
It's more complicated than that. I'm sorry to say that, you know, this group has been implemented while there is a lot of different structure that already exists, which could be also providing the information and the advice that we have been asking, that they asked us to do. The real added value of the scientific council is that we know that we have an end. It's going to stop sometime. So it's not, you know, it's something that is with a short life. We have absolutely no dependency on them. So we are free of language with them. And that's what they expect. And we are supposed to be highly reactive. I mean, back to a couple of meetings we had in the early times of the pandemic. We have been producing a lot of different documents for them. Overall, we prepared 60 different documents for them, and we tend to work every day to try to provide as much information as possible, and being linked with the scientific committees of the other countries as well. So it's again back to the relationship with the politicians. It's interesting to see that actually. What was interesting is that there was a kind of very good relationship that was implemented. We trusted each other. I mean, there was no, the language we had was simple language. It was not sophisticated, try to mend things that have not been said and things like that. So it's blunt and clear, plain discussion. Nothing is hidden there. And, but we stay for what we are. I mean, we're just scientists advising. And we can sometimes complain when they don't follow our advice, but they have, their agenda.
Florence Agostino, is crisis time a bad time to take science into consideration? Is it too late?
No, it's never too late, for sure. No, it's never too late. But it's true that if you see the wrong part of that crisis, it's true that the scientists, a lot of people talk during this period, and in my opinion, it will let a lot of little traces. So we have to find a new way of communication between the general population and the scientists, because this crisis will remain a period in which everyone would have talked about everything, even if you're a scientist, maybe you're not the good one to talk about.
Yes, during the pandemic, some scientists have been invited by journalists to publicly express their point of view on topics without being technically experts about them. So it's, according to you, it's a problem.
Yes, it's a real problem, because a lot of them provide advice, not in front of the general population,
But they are also citizens. After all.
But if you talk about as a citizen, there's no problem. You can be a doctor, I don't know, baker, or whatever. There's no problem if you talk as a citizen. But if you go in front of the journalist and you said, yes, I'm a medical doctor or I'm a scientist, and I talk about SARS-CoV-2, there is a big problem if you say something that is wrong, or if you give your opinion as if you were a politician. That you're not, because as mentioned before, to be a politician, you have to be elected. You have to be chosen by the population. So the scientists have to choose when they talk, if they are talking as a citizen, as a politician. You can be a scientist and to choose to go in politics. There are a lot of scientists going in politics, and I think it's very important. Or you talk as a scientist, and if you talk as a scientist, you have to remain on the way you chose before. I mean a scientist dialogue about things that you know about, things that you maybe publish, but not like that, not just for the pleasure to be in front of a journalist at the TV and say hello to your children.
Jérôme Honnorat, do you share this point of view?
Yeah, I totally agree with Florence. The science is the opposite of to say something in the TV at 8 o'clock. So if you just want to speak as a citizen and to present something, and your opinion, not a fact, your opinion, it's not scientist. So I think that the crisis underlines that there is a very short line between science and show business, and so for the general population, it seems to be the same, because it's the same guy. Sometimes he's a scientist, sometimes he's a showbiz man. So it's very difficult at the end to have a clear opinion of the fact. And because at the end, even the facts are discussed. So it's very, very difficult.
A question of Camille from the chat. According to all of you, how could we manage to do the general population better understand the time that need science researcher? Because politicians are expecting answer in short time to respond to people. How could we, this is the question of Camille that I read to you. How could we manage to do the general population better understand the time that need science researcher? It's a communication question.
Yeah, no, it's not only communication. It's to develop scientific thinking at school. It's as simple as that. I mean, you know.
Let's organize another roundtable on this subject.
The point is that
I'm totally agree.
It's very easy to understand. When you talk about somebody that is, you know, that has a high level of what we call culture, would you think about somebody that has been reading lots of books or somebody that has been spending a lot of times in the lab? And why wouldn't be a scientific somebody that has a high level of culture? It's because, you know, what has been what is in our mind actually is somebody that has the culture is somebody that knows how to repeat specific sentences from very well-known writers. That is where you have culture. But if you, I mean, one of the thinkers thing, and that's not me that said that, that's Etienne Klein. I don't know if you heard, if you know this guy.
Everybody here knows him, I think.
Yeah. So Etienne Klein says one of the scientific culture everybody should know is how to demonstrate that the Earth is wrong. You know, that's a wrong shape. It's very easy. Would you be able to do it?
Personally,
so,
no.
And you know, no. But so you don't have scientific culture. So you can't pretend having culture. So that's the level, you know, that's one example. It's a stupid example, but it's just like that. You know, it's just that if you want to convince people, then you need to talk. But, you know, you don't have to convince people that the Earth is round. It is round. It's not the conviction. It's real life. It's wrong. So the fact that people are challenging that is that they just miss the scientific training, the basic scientific training that has to be done at school, so that everybody understands science, that you can demonstrate things. And unless you're able to demonstrate it, then it's still a theory, and then after it becomes a fact. So black holes are in the middle of that. You know, we start to see these, but they have been invented by Einstein first, and now we tend to develop, and it took quite a while to be able to see that, you know, to demonstrate the black holes really, you know. So that is how to improve actually the understanding of what is science. You have to start from school.
I agree.
Yes, Jérôme Honnorat, pardon.
I agree, and you can see with the change in the population, because 20 years ago, most of the best students go to scientific studies. And now it's not the case, and it's very difficult to recruit scientific in the scientific school, because most of the students want to go to commercial study or something, but to get money quickly. And so it's a clear demonstration that the scientific level in our schools decrease.
Let's talk about science management, please. And it's another important subject related to this gap between science and policymakers. According to some researchers, the pandemic has revealed a lack of funding for some areas of research which could have significantly helped to fight against COVID-19, such as virology, etc. Do you agree? Or is the question a little bit more complex? And my question echoed the question of Elodie in the chat. Do you think the COVID crisis will be positive or negative for science, especially with regard to the huge budgets put into COVID projects? So I'd like to mention with you the question of the money in science. Who wants to begin?
Science is not only, well, money is important, but science is not only a matter of money. It's a matter of training, just like we said, and it's a matter of having the willingness of doing research. It's a kind of, well, you have to have a mindset to do that. Not everybody can do research, and I'm not sure that all the medical doctors can be able to do research, and I can talk about myself as well. Anyway, we should not look and have a too narrow focus on what is the relationship between the politicians and the scientists through the issue of getting funds. It's too restrictive. There has been some at some level. There has been some very big plans that have been decided, and there was the cancer plan, which was a very important step that allowed to develop more research group and more funding on cancer because there was a political willingness to do that. And it was a major issue. We could imagine that, for example, the neurological disease becomes sometimes a master plan for which we need to have a lot of funding because there's a lot of issues there to understand how it works and to understand how to prevent that. So, and there could be as well big fundings on emerging viruses, for example. And all this, it's a kind of, we touch on that. It's the kind of building a research strategy that is with sustainable funding. And to try to develop as much as possible a good level of funding that may not only come from public funding, but there might be private-public partnership, and Lyonbiopôle is there for that. But in our country, it's difficult to do that because you are rapidly blamed of conflict of interest if you have that kind of funding. And I can take my example for that. When I do my research work at the City in Virpat, one of the items for the evaluation is how much public-private partnership you have. And if I have some, it's very good. But as the head of the French National Reference Center for Respiratory Viruses, it is completely forbidden to have a private partnership with my lab. So what do? Either I'm good at the level of the surveillance, and then I'm bad for the research, or I'm good for the research, but I'm a bad guy for the surveillance.
I would like to hear. I get the point. I would like to hear Florence Agostino on this matter because it's a crucial point.
Yes. I think it's a very complicated question because for sure the easy answer is to say there's not enough money. There's never enough money. I'm not so sure that there's not enough money, but I think there's no long view about what we want to do, what are the priority, and that's why science and politics are so linked. And in my opinion, we are not clearly sure about what we want to do with science and which place we would like to let at the science here in France. And maybe in Europe, some health countries has a different view and has been able to develop a real long-term policy with a huge program and giving the opportunity to develop, as mentioned by Bruno just before, in the same time, grant and public-private partnership. And I think we really have to think about, again, a long-term view. We have too much grant in France. The researchers spend a lot of time doing a lot of files for having little money. It's a part of the job of Lyonbiopôle, so we are very happy to have a lot of cool. But I think that if we try to highlight what could be changed after this crisis, really having long-term programs, giving a long-term view will be very, very important, and not having a kind of conference between a technological approach or fundamental basic research and having again a link, something on the way between the two is very important too. Everything is too much separate now. We really need to return at a general view.
Should this general view, this long-term view about what science, what we have to do with science, should it be a subject of the next, a major subject of the next electoral presidential election? Because
I'm
science
sure
seems so.
That all of three, so I don't want to speak for Bruno and Jérôme, but I'm sure that
speak for yourself.
Agree. Yes, I speak for myself, but I'm sure we all agree with that. But as mentioned before, the science is not a real part of the debate in policy now. The debate was about how can we do to face the crisis, but not to think about why we are here now and what could change and what is the place that we want to let. And I was very surprised, for example, that we really don't talk about the change at the university, at the big program developed now by the government. So I'm not sure it will be really something important in the debate coming. And maybe again, because it's not a part of our education, it's not something that we talk about. We talk about a lot of things, but not that. It's not a social point, even if, in my opinion, it's a real part of the social we can develop.
Just a short question for you from Clotilde, for you, Florence. In Lyonbiopôle, did you have some change in the budget you have to give to specific topics, COVID research, or this is quite similar as before and you still have several research domains? It's a question from Clotilde.
So Lyonbiopôle never give the money directly to the research, but in fact we don't have any change, and we are a non-profit organization, and as everyone we are looking for funding to develop our activities, and the topic remained the same, because at the early beginning of the organization we were created to fight infectious disease and to develop this whole approach and all this knowledge about health. So it didn't change a lot of things for us regarding the funding, I think. I mean.
Thank you for your answer. To bring the question of science in the political discussion, should some scientists become politicians? Is it a way to Jérôme Honnorat, for instance, or Bruno Lina?
I think that there is no miraculous solution. You can have somebody that could be better than the other, or yes, you may have some scientists that could be a very good politician. But just to illustrate the way to finance research, 40 years ago, there is with INSERM and CNRS, all the money was some labelized units received a lot of money to develop research for 4 years, without other grants, but the level of money was higher than now. And we changed the policy to have some specific grant per year and to have only few money for the global institute or research unit. And so we can constate that it's not better, it's the same. Some of them receive money, some others have no money. It depends on the level of the policy and the grant. You can see that in the last years in Lyon, oncology and cancer research received a lot of money, and so we increased dramatically the level of the institute. So it's good, but at the end, after a few years, we don't know that it's the best because all the money are for cancer, but it is the best because now we have a pandemic, and perhaps it was better to invest in infectious disease. But as Bruno said, perhaps it's not the right way. It could be better to invest in neuroscience. And so there is no miracle solution, and we have to discuss, and we have some equilibrium between policy and research.
Marine in the chat share this point of view with us. To follow up with the remark on the scientific level decrease in schools, as a one-year experienced biology teacher, it is a fact, that's what she said, students want to do less and gain more, so how to convince French government to invest in scientific and research fields? Who wants to react? Nobody.
The question asked is about the attractivity of the scientific
yes, that's it.
The scientific field. So, but it's you know, the problem is not only in science; it's many different subjects. So I think that you need somehow, if you want to do science, you need really to want to do science. If you don't want to do science, don't do it. You need to really be convinced that you may bring things in the field of knowledge because of the science you're doing there. It's like that. I mean, it is not possible to just double the salary of the people there to try to attract people. It's not. I mean, it's not enough. It's not because you have a huge salary that you work best. It's because you're committed into the research and you think that what you do is interesting. And that could be one of the good aspects of these of the call for the grants, where if you have a good idea, if you have a good knowledge, you're likely to be succeeding in the granting system. It's a way of reaching money, but you need to do that in a field and in a place where there's no missed opportunities for those that are doing research. I mean, it couldn't be too restricted. You know, the field of research has to be very wide. And I think that the scientists need to be better financed, for sure. When you look at the GDP in France, and the part of the GDP which is dedicated to science, it's not the biggest one, far from what we do see in other countries. So it is possible to leverage a little bit the funding, but you need to do that it has to be built, and you have to explain why, and you have to remember also that funding is the budget of France is one big pocket. So if you put more money into the research, it means that you put less money somewhere else. Because you can't just create money. So we as scientists need to be convincing so that science need to be better financed. And the better ways to convey this information that we need more money is through the institute. I mean, the leaders of the CNRS and the DG of CNRS, of INSERM, of INRAE, of IRD, of CIRAD, or of all these structures need to be convincing close to the policymakers, because they are actually talking directly to the policymakers to try to convince them that it is worth putting money into research because it increases the quality of life.
And then the ministry has to convince Bercy to go
it's Bercy
to this direction, because
you know,
I'm quite sure that Antoine Petit and the others do their best to share this point of view, but then they have, you know, this glass. Yes,
can we help them
to answer to Clotilde? In my way, I think that the best would be to convince political makers that increase of scientific teaching in school will increase integration and understanding of all our problems with the different level of the population. To increase scientific teaching in school will increase the knowledge of the children and their ability to be free, to develop
to be a good citizens.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a very important thing. I note it for another broadcast or a roundtable. Camille shares this remark in the chat. I think scientists have to be more implicated in transmission of their knowledge to young people and teachers. What about the role? Let's talk about the way to bridge the gap between scientists and policymakers. We have 30 minutes to do so. It's very short, but we can do that. And Camille offers the transition. So what could be the role? How can we synchronize those two worlds, policymakers and scientists? Do scientists have to put in a little bit more effort in the way they communicate the importance of their research to policymakers? Florence.
Well, it's not an easy question, but I think that maybe to be a part of the social contract and to integrate science in the main field, the main preoccupation of the politicians could be the beginning of something different. I think that maybe the scientists accept more and more to go out of their labs, and it's very important. For sure, science is a way of thinking and working which can be understood like that. It have to be explained. So maybe the scientists can go to the politicians, even if maybe it's just a dream. I think that by including the science in education, as mentioned before, in a long view of the social contract, can be the beginning of a dialogue, maybe more interesting between politicians and scientists, not only on the way you don't understand me, I'm on the long-term view, yes, but I have to answer a short question. It's true that the politics have to face a huge acceleration of the problems, and people are waiting immediate solutions. So maybe opening the labs, the activity can be the beginning of a different understanding of the issues.
On this same subject, thank you, Florence Agostino. Monica says in the chat, scientists so far have been addressing the public only when they find something major, and then they don't address the process of research. Thus, the public doesn't understand the findings and the methods, and then don't trust science. Would you agree?
Not totally, because in fact, if you want to know something about a scientific subject, you can use your computer and internet, and in few minutes, you will have a lot of information, a lot of different communication. you will have some videotape. You will have the results of some study. You have access to all the theses around the world, to a lot of articles.
Yes, but the path that leads. Yes, but the path that leads to this knowledge, who explain it?
It's boring.
It's boring.
Yeah.
But isn't it essential to share this boring work in order to the population to understand how science is made?
Yeah, I don't know. I have no real solution how to do that, except the teaching course, and to have to love it. You want to know more, and most of the people are not interested really by research. But if they want, they have the ability to find everything. So I think that, again, it's a problem of cultural view and the ability to be curious and to want to see exactly where is the truth and to be able to compare, to be critic. But the communication is already available for everybody.
Monica answers to you, but the general public doesn't necessarily know how to screen valid information.
So maybe it's again about education, about school. If the young people are if at school they learn how to search, how to be interested in science, maybe it can change, and at that point you can search and you can know what is good information or wrong information. And in my opinion, there's no opposition between loving books and being very interesting about the science and the way of developing a real scientific knowledge.
What could be the role? There's a lot of list of PhD students that are listening to you, to us right now. So I'm thinking about them. What could be the role of PhD students to facilitate the dialogue between scientists and policymakers and politicians?
Very important.
Yes.
Very important.
Can you develop?
For example, the thesis in 3 minutes. I don't know if you know this program. It's very nice to be able to have a good scientific
not everybody
view
not everybody and not every director and PhD director at the beginning of this challenge proposed by CNRS and the CPU were agree with the idea at the very beginning. Come on, 3 minutes for a thesis. What a strange idea. And I put strange to be polite.
But when you look at it, it's perfect.
Yes.
Because they are able to have a clear message.
Do you think
clear in 3 minutes.
Do you think that senior scientists have changed their mind about the role of PhD students as far as science communication is concerned?
I think that most of them must have the ability to present in 3 minutes a good message.
Just one thing. When I take a PhD student in my lab, what I tend to think and to tell him is that, or her, is that at the beginning of the 3 years, I know more than him or her. At the end of the 3 years, he or she must explain to me what she found. You know, that's the way we'll leverage up the knowledge. Is that the added value of the PhD students is that they should know more than the mentor at the beginning, at the end of the study. That's the first one. The second thing regarding the presentation in 3 minutes, it's a very good exercise for the PhD student, but it's a very poor way of teaching. So you must look at that like a kind of exercise for the PhD student to try to make a very dense presentation of what they did during their 3 years. But back to your questions about how to explain science, you can't explain science deeply in 3 minutes. It's not possible. That's not a teaching way. It's a communication way. So PhD presentation in 3 minutes is a kind of, it's how to advertise about how science can be fun, because usually this presentation can be very funny. But it doesn't tell you what is the way of thinking that you had to go through the years to get the results you have.
Of course.
So, and again, when you talk about scientific culture, it's impossible. I mean, my student can tell you what is the HA-NA balance on the surface of a virus in 3 minutes. I'm not sure that if you have to explain that later on to another scientist, that you would be able to explain it again. And that's so. We must be careful, because between what is communication and what is learning or explaining in detail.
That's a very good point, I guess.
But I didn't say that it's not worth listening to these presentations, because that could be really fun.
But it's a very specific exercise, of course. Marine said, yes, sorry, Mrs. Agostino.
Maybe I would like to highlight that the PhD are in general young people speaking to other young people, and it's not about learning, it's not about communication, but it's about the transmission to other people around them as a citizen. And maybe now it's maybe the community of PhD is a little bit different. There are more women, maybe a lot of more diversity. And I think that PhD have to maybe to use that to give a different information in a different way, a way that maybe I'm not able to imagine because I'm not young. Maybe really, maybe they have a new way about speaking about what they are doing, about the explanation with a glass of wine or something at their friends. What is the science? What is the time of the science? What is really the impact, the social impact, the general impact, not just the impact about their thesis or their own career, but what it means for society having a large community of scientists and what they give to the society by their knowledge.
Marine says in the chat, from my experience in scientific mediation, people are curious. There is just no or few offer from scientists themselves to make their research accessible. When you explain difficult concepts in simple words, they are really grateful to scientists. Once again, it seems to pledge for a bigger investment of scientists themselves in science communication with any format. It could be 3 minutes or a big conference.
We receive regularly some citizens in our labs to explain what we do, and for most of the grant now you have a summary for citizens and not just for scientists to explain what we do. So I agree. It's obviously necessary to explain with simple words.
But maybe you do not have time enough.
No, we are.
How to find time to do science communication? That's a great question too.
But it's our work, and we do that a lot of time per year.
Okay, I know some researchers who says, I love science communication and I would love to do more science communication. But when I do it and when I come back to my lab, I can see that the other scientists think, well, if he takes time to do science communication, well, it's not a good researcher. What do you think that this kind of point of view is changing?
What's the scientific basis to say that? How do you compare? It's the same that science.
I talk about things that people tell me on phone.
I understood. It was just a funny remark to say that science, there is no clear solution at the end. There is some different advice on the same point of view, but everything is right. You just have to demonstrate that it's true.
To come back to medias, it's a question from Clotilde. The COVID crisis has led to an over-mediatization of science, of research. Do you think that this can have a negative effect on people's trust in science? Paradoxally.
Well, the people tend to they remember the the discussions, the pseudo scientific discussions that took place in some of the networks, and the media networks, which is the news channel, those that are having news on a regular basis. There are these channels that are chasing people to sit and discuss, and actually it turned out this kind of scientific discussion into something that was a global debate on whether it was wrong or right, which is not the way we do science actually. So on that sense, it is true that the image of science has been somehow a little bit, well, it's not better. It's not good to have that kind of discussion in public. Anyway, you have to remember that science is not a field of every people very happy about every people. We're fighting. We disagree, and we try to have results showing that we are right and that the others may be wrong. So it's very open, and it can be sometimes a bit rude, but it doesn't necessarily need to be in front of everybody, because it's discussions sometimes that most of the people really don't understand, because you need some background sometimes to understand that. So in that sense, the discussion that has been taking place in this news channel has been really impairing the image of science. But it is also kind of revelator of what can be discussion within the scientific world.
This roundtable meeting will end in approximately 10 minutes, so feel free to share any questions, any comments you want. Dear PhD students, I have a question about, once again, the relationships and the best way to bridge the gap between these two worlds. A traditional way used by scientists to publicly share their results to politicians are scientific reports. Are they really read? In 2021, is it still an efficient tool to share knowledge in direction to politicians?
Well, what I can tell you is the capacity of politicians to read is very good. They read very fast, and they understand very well. So I think that interesting reports are definitely read. The question is at what level in ministries it is read, whether it's highest level or not, which is another question. But it is always worthwhile to communicate the results of the science when the science is of good quality and maybe really something very interesting and very new. It is important to share that on an open access with the policymakers.
Camille, your question in the chat has been shortened, so please continue your question or your opinion in another slot, please, because I do not have the entire question in the chat. Monica asked, we witnessed that even scientists that were highly respected had irresponsible comments about the COVID crisis. Do we need designated spokesmen from our community? I guess it may be a good idea on the paper, but how to choose them? What do you think about it?
I will
Do
be
we
very
need
interested
representative?
about having the definition of the good people for myself.
We are
Who decides that? Who decides that?
Jérôme Honnorat.
We are in a free country, and everybody has the right to say that he think, even if it's wrong. And so,
Yes,
the
go
good
on.
thing would be, the good thing would be to know what is the why are these scientists talking about this subject? Is it because they have a good knowledge of the subject, or is it because they have been qualified as scientists in another topic? So it is how much are they relevant to make a comment or anything on this on the subject? And that is something which is sometimes forgotten. You know, I've heard many. Well, I have nothing about the surgeons, but I heard many surgeons talking about basic science in viruses, and it's always very, surprising.
Mm. Do you agree, Florence Agostino, Jérôme Honnorat? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. To end this roundtable, what kind of initiatives should be launched, should be engaged, according to you, to bridge the gap between politicians and scientists? Do you have good practices to share?
I think
this has to be on the long term. This has to be on the long term. You cannot decide that within 6 months everything will be solved. So it's really something for which you need to build. And you need to build discussion and trust between those that are talking together. So
what could be the best way to do so? This is my question.
To increase money.
More money?
Yeah. I'm sure. Not more money in the lab, but more money to teaching science, more money to increase the number of scientists, more money to do research, and to have a general way to develop science in every aspect. Because the global level in France for science is too low. It's very, very low. So there is no investment for the future. It's not necessary to have a policy about the global increase of the heat and to think that we will solve just because we think about it. We need to increase our general level.
I see you agreeing, Florence Agostino.
Yes,
we have to invest.
I think that we have to reinvest to have a long-term view, as I mentioned before, and I think we have to provide a place in which politicians and scientists have the occasion to share their preoccupation, and we have to provide them, to continue to provide them high-level knowledge about science and the opportunity to talk together, because they are two very intelligent communities. So I'm very optimistic, and I'm sure that if we continue to provide the place for the dialogue between politicians and science, at the end of the day, we can have a long-term view about science policy in France and in Europe. We don't talk about Europe, but there is the European level, which is very, very important.
I asked you at the beginning of this event if France was a unique case. So indirectly, I hoped that we could speak about Europe, but 1 hour and a half, it's very short. One last word, Bruno Lina, please, about ideas or of initiative that we can push to facilitate this dialogue.
Well, it has to be a multiple way. You need to go from different angles. So there's the direct discussions, and there are some other more silent discussions. We need to think long term, short term. We need definitely some investment to try to leverage up the quality of science that is done there. So it's a multitask, and we need a lot of people to do that. So, but one very strong message has to be conveyed, which is everybody needs science, and we need to train in science from the very young age, and we need to have a better understanding of what is science and what is not science as well. So let's help the scientific community to build and bring that message.
Okay, let's the scientific
and
community.
And the young one can be very good vectors.
Yes, I think they have a big role, but they can't do everything. They need help, these PhD students. And so thank you, three of you, for all these ideas, for this conversation. It was a huge pleasure to hear you, and I can't say how happy I was to animate this debate. A huge thanks to you. And it's the end of this roundtable meeting. So once again, thank you everybody, and a huge thanks to all the PhD students that participated to this debate. You can find me back, if you want, on the GrandLabo channel on YouTube. And the last word, of course, is to the organizers. Clotilde, it's up to you.
Thank you, Mathieu, and especially a big thanks to the speakers for this nice debate. We get a lot of questions, so I think that people were really interesting. So thank you for the participation of everyone, and thank you again, Mathieu, for animating this debate. I hope you spend good time also
yes.
Here with us.
Sure.
And so we will continue with the awards ceremony just in the following time.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
a
very
lot.
much.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.